Hi, I'm Victor Vogel. Welcome to How Organizational Competence Can Help You Become the Leader in Your Industry. You know, it's probably pretty obvious to become a leader, you have to have good organizational effectiveness. You have to be good at what you do, and your people have to perform to a high level. You have to keep your eye on the number one position constantly. You cannot let up the pressure. You have to be focused on being the leader in the industry on an ongoing basis. For that, you turn to your leadership. Leadership guides and directs the organization. They have to create the environment and the culture that will allow the organization to become the leader in the industry. And the organization has to commit to recruiting and finding and training and maintaining high quality leadership to help motivate employees towards that number one position. You have to create a culture of high performance teams, teams that integrate with each other, integrate across departments, integrate internationally and domestically, and have a high capacity to use virtual technology to achieve their goals and objectives. Let's begin with the assumption that you are not the number one leader in your industry. Therefore, you have decided you need to change. You need to change in a way that will position you to be the number one leader in your industry. So, that requires you to create what's called a change definition. So, what is a change definition? It's a clear understanding of the desired state after the change is completed. And what are the critical issues that you need to address to make that change? Once leadership has created the change definition, it now needs to let the rest of the organization know that there will be a change and involve them in the assessment process and the implementation of the change. So once the decision is made to launch a change program, senior leadership must develop a communication strategy to inform the organization of the change. And that communication program must be ongoing throughout the whole change process. Senior leadership must support and sustain the communication program. Now that you've let your organization know there's going to be a change, you need to determine, is your organization ready for a change? And there are two things you need to look at. And the first thing we need to address is the environment of the organization. Is it ready? When we're talking about environmental readiness, really what we're talking about is a snapshot of your culture. What is the culture like in your organization, and is it ready to handle a change process? Now, the way to do that is through a three-pronged approach. You want to conduct a survey of the organization, and that survey should be conducted by a third-party company in a manner that guarantees that privacy and confidentiality is intact, so no employee can be identified out or singled out from the survey. You're looking for the most accurate and honest information you can get, so it has to be confidential. And the only way to do that effectively is to have a third party run that in a manner that employees truly understand they are protected from being identified from taking the survey. The other thing you want the survey to be able to do is to ensure that you cover all of the organization. And in some cases, you may even want to survey your customers or your vendors They can provide some valuable insights into how you're perceived outside of your organization or how your people are perceived outside of the organization. And so the survey internally should be able to break down the organization to at least the departmental level, but we don't want to go too much further than that in order to ensure that we have protected the employees and their confidentiality. Now, once the third party organization has shared the results with those in charge of the readiness assessment, that would be some senior management and certainly consultants and human resource groups within the organization, you'll want to get together some focus groups. These are randomly selected employees who from various departments whom you can get together and sit down and go over some key points that the survey has pointed out, just to validate that what the survey data is saying in fact seems to be reflective of the organization as a whole. And this is just a validity check on the survey and a validity check of the information that comes out. You don't share the survey with these people. You're simply identifying key areas and asking employees, is this true about this? And they are both strengths and weaknesses that the survey has pointed out. Now, the last phase of the environmental readiness process is presenting the information to the employees. This is a very crucial, very key period in the readiness process. You have the survey information, which was collected anonymously and is obviously very valid for the most part. And you should also have your focus group information as a secondary validity on the survey data. So when you go to speak employees, you should feel very confident that what you have is a good, accurate snapshot of the organization. Now, if that's a very positive snapshot, your job is going to be much easier. However, in many cases, it's not all positive, and work is going to have to be done to ready the organization. So when you present this information, it has to be presented not in a disciplinary manner, but in a developmental manner, so that people can see that the information they have provided allows you and them together as a team to build a highly effective organization through improving any issues that were brought out during the survey that could be barriers to the change process. So this is developmental. It should be handled with a combination of consultants, senior management, and the HR organization within your company. Next, it's important we take a look at the other aspect of the organization that will be important to changing it and making it effective, and that's leadership. How ready are your leaders? And basically, you would use the same three-pronged approach that you did with your cultural assessment with your leadership. And hopefully, the third party who does this for you has a set of instruments that integrates between the leadership and the culture so that you can draw a comparison of how leaders create the right culture. In your assessment of leadership and leaders, you want to assess two basic areas: personal leadership and positional leadership. Let's deal with personal leadership first. Personal leadership
really needs to be looked at in terms of traits or characteristics. And the first one I like to talk about is sagacity. And really, what that is talking about is keen perception or a wisdom. Something beyond the specific details of day in and day out activity. The ability to see uh, different points and connect those points into a meaningful purpose. Another characteristic that goes hand in hand with sagacity is acumen. And acumen is aptitude. It's an astuteness or an awareness of what's going on around you all the time. Being able to see things as they're coming towards you before they happen. And a cleverness of being able to deal with situations and events as they occur. You can see if you combine acumen with sagacity, you have the makings for a very powerful leader to start with. The next characteristic, although perceived as basic, really is critical, and that's competence. A leader has to be perceived as the expert in their area, knowing how to do what they're supposed to do, both from the field that they're leading and from the leadership perspective. Employees will follow a leader that has competence.
Another very important leadership characteristic is compassion, and compassion in turn leads to respect. Now, by compassion, we mean the leader's ability to understand employees, understand what motivates them, understand what's going on in their life, understand and have concern for and empathy for what that employee is going through, both in their job and in many cases in their life. Because although we say we want to separate those, one has an impact on the other. And it's important the leader understand that and show the ability to have compassion and concern for the employee. This in turn will create a communication between the leader and the employee that leads to respect. And it's a mutual respect where the employee respects the leader because they see the compassion they show towards them. And it's also one where the leader respects the employee because they know more about them. They understand them better. And that in turn makes it easy to do things like discipline because then you're disciplining out of caring and concern. And that leads to more effective change and improvement in employees. So compassion is a very, very key characteristic, and having respect for employees is a key personal leadership trait. The last personal leadership traits I want to discuss is congruity and consistency. Congruity simply means that you behave in a manner that you say you're going to behave in. Now, let me give you a brief, simple explanation. You're standing in front of somebody and you utter the verbal words yes, but you shake your head no. Your communication is not congruent. Your verbal message is not the same as your nonverbal signal that's sent out there. So that makes it very confusing for a person to understand exactly what you mean. Now, you could take that and expand it to the macro level and say, in the mission statement of an organization, there is a statement that employees are our most valuable assets. But then when it comes time in stressful and strained situations to make decisions, we decide to eliminate employees from the organization in order to save money. So therefore, employees truly are not the most valuable asset in the organization. Money is. You might better make your mission statement congruent by saying Employees are considered as one of the valuable assets in an organization, but not the most valuable asset. So, though you have to be careful when you're communicating with employees that you send congruent signals to them. Now, this relates to consistency, and that consistency simply means that you behave the same way on a regular basis. So if you treat one situation a particular way, you need to treat it that way on an ongoing basis for you to the employee to be consistent. So uh, by that action of being consistent, employees can see a pattern that that they can relate to and feel comfortable with. So when you tie what you say to how you behave, and you behave on a consistent basis, employees are better able to predict their leadership and understand them. And that prediction goes a long ways to helping leaders convince employees they need to do certain things. Now let's take a look at positional leadership. And really what this means is the leader's ability to maximize the organization to achieve its final goals. Let's start with the activity value assessment. Now, what is an activity value assessment? We can break it down into the activity and then the value characteristics. And what this simply means is the leader's ability to understand how to maximize people to the highest potential they have in order to meet the objectives of the company. Every company begins with a vision, where they intend to go. And then they create a mission, and that mission has a lot to do with how they intend to get there. And from the mission, they begin to develop strategies or direction towards getting to where they want to be. And out of the strategies come objectives, and from objectives, you begin to evolve activities that will accomplish the objectives, which in turn lead to the strategies, which in turn lead to the mission, and finally achieving your vision. Well, activity value assessment, the first thing you do is identify all the activities that you're going to have to perform in order to get the organization to where it wants to be. And then for each one of those activities, you have to assign a value, because not all the activities have the same importance. So therefore, you have to create a value for those activities. And from the activity value assessment, you then can define the job positions that will accomplish all of these activities and assign some sort of price structure or value to the person who's going to be in that position. And that's very important, because what you're then doing is aligning the positions in the organization to ensure they will achieve the activity through the activities, the objectives, and the mission and the vision of the organization. Once you have a listing of all your activities and you've assigned some sort of value to those activities contributing to the success of achieving your objectives, it's time to break those down into manageable parts. You sort of chunk them, if you will, into various areas that we will call roles. And those roles will end up being job definitions in the end. As you can see in the next level, you'll hear about job definition. But now we can assign roles. And what roles do is they keep the organization out of chaos. And where roles are ignored, most of the time you find a lot of difficulty and chaos within organizations. Employees stepping over employees, departments getting in the way of other departments, and a lot of confusion and a lot of inefficiency and effectiveness happen. So, what we're doing is taking these activities, breaking them down or chunking them in to roles that will eventually be jobs. And with those roles now, uh, because you've put a value assessment on them, you can assign accountabilities to those roles. In other words, some sort of concrete measurable level of success that you can measure those roles by that eventually will be formulated into a performance management system that allows the leader to control the roles and consequently all of the activities and focus them in the right direction for the organization to be successful. Now, the next logical area to go to from roles and accountabilities is job definitions. And let me kind of differentiate between roles and jobs with a simple explanation. For example, a role might be marketing. And then you take that role of marketing and you break that down into different jobs within the marketing role. And that job might be, for example, a marketing manager or an investor communication professional and on and so forth. So roles are a broader perspective of activity towards based on the activities, and then we break those roles down into to more specific jobs that each of those activities can be related to. So job definitions are very, very important, and they also lead to the ability to effectively assign accountabilities, and job performance management systems should clearly define the job definitions and the performance criteria necessary for each one of those job definitions. So then you have your roles established, you have your jobs defined, and the next thing to do is to help take the value part of the activity value assessment and go from there. Now, the next logical step for a leader to be able to do is from the value assessment of the activities and the roles and the jobs that define, from that value assessment, you can now complete what's called a compensation review. And what you're doing there is you're taking the jobs and you're defining exactly how much that job is worth in terms of dollars and cents, and that normally comes in the form of a base salary and an incentive. Now, try to keep out of the picture of compensation relative to this part of your design things like healthcare and other things that people tend to throw in. They can be somewhat confusing and inflate the job's value assessment. This is really focused on the activity based on what that job is worth in terms of pay and any kind of incentives that would be related to that, not so much the benefits package as a whole. You can bring that in later as part of your overall compensation design. But for this particular part of it, we really want to know how much money do we pay someone to do the jobs that accomplish the roles and the activities necessary to get the objectives done. And that is normally in the form of a base salary and or incentives relative to compensation. Now that all of the other positional leadership activities have been completed by the leader, the activity value assessment, the roles and accountabilities, the definition of jobs, assigning compensation incentive to those jobs, you can then now see exactly how much all of this is going to cost within the organization and put together the total amount that you're going to have in order to make the organization successful. Uh, we call this budgets. They're budgeted allocations, and leaders need to be able to understand all of this in order to be able to financially be successful in their organization. And without the previous activity value assessments, roles and accountability, job and definition, when you assign a dollar value, you would simply be, it'd be like a shot in the dark. You don't know where that bullet's going to land. So these other factors that a leader should be able to do from a positional perspective is very important because it allows them to control the dollars necessary to control the people resources they have to accomplish your objectives. So it's very, very important that these processes happen sequentially like this so that the leader has a full grasp on what is necessary to accomplish the objectives of the company. By ensuring leadership readiness, you're ensuring that the right people will be in the right positions at the right time and doing the right things to make your organization successful. Now let's take all the information that we gleaned from coming up with a change definition, preparing an organization by communicating to them that we do need to make a change, taking a look at our environmental and cultural readiness to make change, and some of the things that we need to review and assess relative to our leadership's ability and its readiness to make change. That all that information can now be taken and we can ask some questions about our organization as a whole and its readiness for change. Now let's take a moment and ask some questions about your organization's readiness to make change and improve organizational competence. First, let's ask some external evaluation questions. Will your corporate image appeal to the best leadership in the market? How attractive will your organization leaders appear to the best leaders who are seeking employment? What competitive advantage do you hold that will attract the best leadership in your business? What is the ratio of internal promotions to external hires when filling key positions? What is the organization's turnover percent of high performance leaders? Why do they leave and where do they go? Now let's ask some internal evaluation questions. First, is there a clear understanding of roles and accountabilities for all leadership positions? And are there key performance indicators for all those positions? Does the selection process provide a means of finding, selecting, and hiring the best of the best leadership? Are there systems in place that creates a learning organization? Is there a performance management system in place that effectively differentiates performance? Are you rewarding your top performers well and eliminating non-performers? And lastly, is there a quality process for identifying and promoting high quality leaders upward in the organization? Finding the answer to these questions will ensure that you have the right people and the right positions so that your organizational readiness is in place for change. In order to become the leader in your industry, we can take all the information you've gathered to this point, and now you need to make some changes and implement some action steps in three specific categories within your organization: your organizational effectiveness, your leadership effectiveness, and the use of high performance team effectiveness. Let's start with some steps that will ensure organizational effectiveness. First, ensure the organization has established and communicated to all employees a clear vision. Make sure the organization has developed and communicated to all employees a mission statement that will directly support the achievement of the organization's vision statement. Ensure the organization's created and infused throughout the organization a culture that creates and reinforces behaviors that directly support the vision and mission of the organization, and has made this part of the organization's key strategies. Ensure the organization's established a cultural assessment process to measure the culture on an annual basis, preferably done by a third party to the organization. Ensure the organization has established clear positions, roles, and key performance indicators for all positions throughout the organization, and has communicated the cultural and personal behaviors expected of all employees throughout the organization. Ensure the organization has established and created a review process that drives employee actions which will successfully support the vision, mission, and culture of the organization. Finally, the organization needs to implement a 360-degree review process for all levels of the organization, including the CEO position. This is the accountability in large corporations of the CEO and board of directors, and in small corporations, the owners, and should be administered by a third party in coordination with the organization's human resource department if they have one. The process should be conducted annually and linked heavily to the culture review and leadership development plans. Incentive programs should be tied to the review process and the cultural assessment. Now let's turn to what must happen in the leadership ranks. First, the organization has to clearly define leadership roles that support the organization's vision, mission, and strategies. Each leadership role has to have a position description that includes key performance indicators which support cultural norms and behaviors. The organization has to establish a 360-degree assessment tool and put it in place to evaluate leadership against the key performance indicators. And that needs to preferably be administered by an outside third party. And it is used to establish leadership development plans for improvement. The organization has to ensure that leadership behavior is supportive of and reflects the established culture of the organization. Leaders must model the behaviors that reflect the desired culture of the organization to the employees in the organization. And finally, the organization has to ensure that there is an established selection and promotion process in place to support the placement of qualified leadership. And this process uses the performance indicators and the 360-degree assessment to assist in the selection and the development processes for ongoing development. The next category, high performance team effectiveness, is something that I've seen a lot of organizations not implement and consequently lose organizational effectiveness. Organizations who want high organizational effectiveness have to implement high performance teams. They must be ingrained in the vision, the mission, the strategy, the action plans, and the processes of the organization. Leadership needs to embrace and encourage teamwork within the organizational culture to ensure organizational effectiveness. To ensure the effectiveness of high performance teams, all layers of the organization must receive training on high performance team skills. In particular, leadership needs to receive training on how to motivate and lead high performance teams. In today's world of technology and global management, high performance teams don't operate in just one concrete building area. They are spread out across the world. So it's important to provide training on how to manage virtual high performance teams that are separated by time and distance and use technology to manage their team effectiveness. Another important aspect about virtual high performance teams is that leadership invests in the necessary technology to manage virtual high performance teams and train people how to use that technology effectively and maintenance it effectively. To ensure high performance teams perform effectively, high performance team management must be part of every leader's performance evaluation. In every individual, there is a preference of how they're going to operate or prefer to operate in a team. Leaders have to ensure that team role preferences are identified for every employee, including the leaders. The organization must ensure incentives are directed towards high performance team achievement. It's important to include high performance team achievements in the selection and promotion criteria when selecting leaders for the organization. I want to take a minute and just talk a little bit about high performance teams and the effectiveness of organizations. In my 30 plus years as a consultant, both internally and externally to organizations, I came to realize quickly no single employee creates organizational effectiveness. There may be some employees that perform better than others, but no single employee takes full accountability for an organization's effectiveness and success. They have to operate within, around, and about others. They have to communicate with others. And sometimes that communication is separated by distance and time. So it becomes very important that organizations understand that to be highly effective as an organization, to be the premier leader in your industry, adapting the idea that you have to create high performance teams and support that concept is critical to the organization's success and particularly their leadership in an industry. I want to take the time to thank you for viewing this video. I hope it proves helpful to you in developing your organization's effectiveness. And if you happen to be in the field of consulting or leading change in organizations, I hope this provides some insights from my experiences that will help you be successful in your career and helping other organizations change. My name is Victor Vogel. I'm an organizational change consultant, and you can reach me by emailing me at contractwithvic@gmail.com or phoning me at 405-308-0258. And feel free to text message me also. If you phone me, please leave a message and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again, and may God bless your work and your activities.